The diplomatic screening queue at Nexus Station Gamma moved with the efficiency of a well-oiled bureaucratic machine, processing delegates from 847 species in preparation for the most important peace summit in galactic history. Security Chief Vex-Kalim's 4 eyes tracked each arrival with practiced precision, his scanner beeping softly as it categorized threats according to the galactic diplomatic protection protocols. High-threat military advisors got the full security treatment. Mid-threat trade representatives got standard screening. Low-threat, cultural attachés got a polite scan and a smile. And then there was the human. "Next," Vex-Kalim called, his voice carrying the bored authority of someone who'd processed thousands of similar screenings without incident. The woman who stepped forward looked exactly like what his scanner had already classified her as. Human female, diplomatic course, threat level minimal. She appeared to be in her 30s, with short dark hair, unremarkable build, and the kind of calm professional demeanor that screamed, harmless bureaucrat. "Name and designation for the record," Vex-Kalim requested, activating his recording system. "Jade Whitmore, Human Diplomatic Corps, Special Envoy for Peace Treaty Negotiations," she replied with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this routine hundreds of times. Vex-Kalim's scanner beeped its standard low-threat confirmation. Purpose of visit: assisting with the Kytherian-Zorbelian peace accords, making sure everyone stays friendly and no one starts shooting at each other. Jade's tone was professionally pleasant, with just a hint of dry humor that Vex-Kalim found oddly reassuring. "Weapons declaration? None declared for diplomatic functions," Jade replied automatically. "Duration of stay? However long it takes to get everyone to agree that killing each other is counterproductive." Vex-Kalim's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. After processing dozens of pompous ambassadors and self-important trade officials, he found the human's casual approach refreshing. "Standard diplomatic immunity applies. You're cleared for—" He stopped mid-sentence as his scanner completed its detailed analysis and displayed results that made his compound eyes widen with confusion. According to the readout, the human's threat assessment was indeed minimal. Her weapons scan was clean. Her diplomatic credentials were properly filed and authenticated. Everything should have been routine, except for one small detail that made Vex-Kalim's security training kick into high alert. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "my scanner is indicating some irregularities in your classification data." "Irregularities?" Jade asked, and her tone remained pleasant, but something in her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "Your service record appears to be restricted. Above my clearance level." Vex-Kalim consulted his display with growing concern. "That's unusual for a diplomatic envoy." "Is it?" Jade seemed genuinely curious about this observation. "I wouldn't know. I don't really pay attention to the bureaucratic side of things." "Ma'am, diplomatic personnel typically have transparent service records for security verification purposes. Your file shows classification levels that suggest—" Vex-Kalim paused, checking his readings again. "Military background? Oh, that old thing." Jade waved a hand dismissively. "Ancient history. I do diplomacy now." "Ancient history that requires level 12 security clearance to access?" "Apparently so. Though I have to say, I'm impressed your system even recognized the classification levels. Most databases can't handle the encoding." Vex-Kalim felt something cold settle in his digestive tract. Level 12 clearance was reserved for information that could destabilize governments. In his 15 years of security work, he'd never encountered a file that required anything above level 8. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to run an extended verification. This is just standard procedure for—" "Of course," Jade interrupted smoothly. "Take all the time you need. I've got nowhere else to be." As Vex-Kalim initiated the extended scan, something else caught his attention. A small detail that his initial screening had missed, probably because his scanner had been focused on weapons and obvious threats. "Excuse me," he said, leaning forward to get a better look. "Is that a service badge on your uniform?" Jade glanced down at the small metal pin on her lapel. "Oh, that? Yeah. Standard diplomatic corps insignia." "Ma'am, I've processed hundreds of human diplomats, and I've never seen a badge like that one." The badge was simple enough, a stylized silver design that looked vaguely like a dove in flight. Peaceful, appropriate for a diplomatic function. Except for the small numerical display embedded in its center, which was currently showing what appeared to be a 4-digit number. "What do those numbers represent?" Vex-Kalim asked, his security instincts now fully activated. "Numbers?" Jade looked down at the badge again, as if she'd forgotten it was there. "Oh, that's just a counter." "A counter for what?" "Successful diplomatic resolutions," Jade replied with the same pleasant tone she'd used for everything else. Vex-Kalim stared at the display, which currently read 3,847. "You've successfully resolved 3,847 diplomatic situations, give or take. The counter doesn't track partial successes or collaborative efforts, where I was just providing support." 3,000... Vex-Kalim's voice trailed off as he tried to process this information. "Ma'am, that number seems statistically improbable. Most senior diplomats handle maybe a few dozen major negotiations in their entire careers. Well, I tend to specialize in the more challenging cases," Jade explained helpfully. "The ones where traditional diplomatic approaches haven't been effective." "What do you mean by challenging cases?" "Oh, you know. Situations where people are shooting at each other and need encouragement to stop. Conflicts where negotiation has broken down completely, that sort of thing." Vex-Kalim's scanner beeped again, indicating that the extended verification was complete. He looked at the results and felt his security training war with evidence that didn't make sense. "Ma'am, your background check is showing some anomalies, such as, according to the Galactic Diplomatic Registry, you don't exist." Jade raised an eyebrow. "That seems like an oversight on their part. The Human Diplomatic Corps has no record of a Jade Whitmore in their personnel files. Bureaucratic error probably. You know how it is with paperwork. The Human Colonial Administration shows no citizenship records for anyone with your name and bio-signature." "Really? That's odd." "Ma'am," Vex-Kalim said, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone trying not to escalate a situation that was already far beyond his comfort zone. "You appear to be claiming an identity that doesn't exist in any official capacity, while carrying credentials that require security clearances I've never seen, for the purpose of attending the most sensitive diplomatic function in recent galactic history. When you put it like that, it does sound a bit irregular," Jade admitted. "A bit irregular," Vex-Kalim repeated weakly. "But I'm sure we can sort this out. Would you like me to call my supervisor?" "Your supervisor?" "Yeah, they can probably clear up the paperwork issues. Though, fair warning, they're not big fans of bureaucratic delays." Vex-Kalim considered his options. He could detain the human for investigation, which would require him to explain to his superiors why he was holding a properly credentialed diplomat based on database inconsistencies. He could clear her through and hope the irregularities were just administrative errors. Or he could escalate to higher authority and let someone with better clearance handle the decision. "Ma'am, I think I'm going to need to speak with my supervisor about this situation." "Of course. Take your time." Jade settled into the waiting area with the patient demeanor of someone who'd been through this process before. "These things usually sort themselves out?" As Vex-Kalim activated his emergency communications system to contact Station Security Command, he caught one more detail that made his blood run cold. The counter on Jade's badge had ticked up by 1, and he was absolutely certain that no diplomatic resolution had occurred in the past few minutes. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was that Jade was now watching him with the kind of interested attention that suggested she was waiting to see how he would handle discovering that his security clearance wasn't high enough to process what was sitting calmly in his waiting area. And something in her expression suggested that while she was perfectly happy to wait for bureaucratic solutions, she had other options available if the diplomatic approach didn't work out. When Station Security Commander Yexthal arrived 12 minutes later, he took one look at Vex-Kalim's readings, glanced at the humans sitting patiently in the waiting area, and immediately activated the highest security protocols in the station's repertoire. "Chief Vex-Kalim," he said quietly, "I need you to very carefully explain to me why you're running threat assessments on someone whose existence appears to be classified above my security clearance." "Sir, she's supposed to be a routine diplomatic screening. Low threat, standard processing." "Low threat," Commander Yexthal repeated, looking at the cascade of security warnings flowing across his display. "Chief, the computer is telling me that this individual's background check requires authorization from Galactic Command Intelligence Division." "Intelligence Division, sir." "Chief, When was the last time you processed a diplomat whose paperwork required military intelligence clearance? Vex-Kalim considered this question carefully. Never, sir. Exactly, because diplomats don't have military intelligence backgrounds. Commander Yexthal looked at Jade, who was still sitting peacefully in the waiting area, apparently reading something on a small electronic device. Unless they're not actually diplomats? Sir, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we may have accidentally stumbled across someone whose job description is significantly different from what her credentials claim. Commander Yexthal activated his emergency communication system and transmitted a priority query to Galactic Command. The response came back within minutes, and his expression grew increasingly grim as he read it. Chief, he said finally, we have a problem. What kind of problem, sir? The kind where Galactic Command is asking us why we're running security checks on individuals whose operational parameters are classified under the Treaty of Restricted Information. Treaty of Restricted Information? The treaty that governs information about military assets so sensitive that acknowledging their existence requires special authorization. Both aliens turned to look at Jade, who had apparently finished her reading and was now watching them with the same patient interest she'd shown throughout the entire process. Sir, Vex-Kalim said carefully, what exactly do you think we're dealing with? Commander Yexthal looked at his display, which was showing security classifications he'd never seen before, connected to a human who didn't officially exist, carrying credentials for an organization that apparently operated above the level of galactic oversight. Chief, he said quietly, I think we just learned why some diplomatic missions have a 100% success rate. Priority alerts began cascading across the displays in Nexus Station Gamma's security center, each one carrying the kind of urgent classification markers that meant someone, somewhere, had made a very serious mistake. Commander Yexthal's security team scrambled to their stations, as warning signals flooded their systems like a digital avalanche. Report! Yexthal barked, his 4 eyes scanning multiple screens simultaneously. Sir, we've got cascading security breaches across all database access points, reported Lieutenant Kexworth, her tentacles dancing across control interfaces with practiced urgency. Someone's been trying to access restricted military archives. Who authorized archive access? That's the problem, sir. Nobody authorized it. The system initiated automatic cross-sanction protocols when we ran the background check on the human diplomat. Commander Yexthal felt his species equivalent of a migraine beginning to form. Explain. The computer tried to verify her service record and accidentally triggered security protocols we didn't even know existed. Apparently asking about this individual's background constitutes an unauthorized intelligence breach. An unauthorized intelligence breach, Yexthal repeated slowly. For a diplomatic envoy. Yes, sir. The system is now demanding clearance levels that... Lieutenant Kexworth paused, checking her readings again. Sir, the system is asking for authorization from the Galactic Security Council. The Galactic Security Council, Yexthal said, his voice carrying the flat tone of someone whose reality was becoming increasingly surreal. The same Galactic Security Council that oversees planetary defense systems and strategic military assets. The same one, sir. Through the security center's reinforced windows, Yexthal could see Jade Whitmore still sitting calmly in the diplomatic screening area, apparently unbothered by the chaos her background check had unleashed. She had put away her reading device and was now observing the frantic activity around her with what looked like professional interest. Sir! Chief Vex-Kalim's voice crackled through the communication system from his position at the screening station. The human is asking if there's a problem. Tell her we're experiencing routine system delays, Yexthal replied, though routine was the last word he'd used to describe their current situation. Sir, she says she's happy to wait, but she's wondering if someone should contact her handler to explain the delay. Her handler? That's what she called them, sir. Commander Yexthal felt something cold settle in his digestive system. In his experience, the only people who had handlers were intelligence operatives, military assets, and individuals whose activities required constant monitoring by higher authorities, none of which were typically classified as minimal threat diplomatic personnel. Lieutenant Kexworth, what exactly did the database tell us about this human service record? That's where things get complicated, sir. The lieutenant's tentacles had stopped their frantic dancing and were now moving with the careful precision of someone handling dangerous materials. The archive query returned partial data before the security protocols kicked in. Show me. The main display activated to show what appeared to be fragments of a military service record, with large sections redacted or marked as classified. What remained visible was enough to make every being in the security center fall silent. Service duration, 15 years. Theater of operations, classified. Mission parameters, classified. Unit designation, operational success rate, 100%. Lieutenant Kexworth read the visible information with growing unease. Casualty reports, camouflage threat neutralization specialist. Current assignment, diplomatic resolution specialist. Diplomatic resolution specialist, Yexthal mused, with a 100% operational success rate. Sir, there's more. The database shows deployment records for every major conflict in the past 15 years. Every major conflict? The Cytherian border wars, the Zorbalian uprising, the Centauri mining disputes, the vegan trade conflicts, the... Lieutenant Kexworth's voice trailed off as she continued reading. Sir, this individual has been present at the resolution of every significant military conflict in our sector for the past decade and a half. Present at the resolution, Yexthal repeated carefully. In what capacity? That information is classified above our clearance level. But sir, according to the timeline, she was present when the Cytherian border wars ended. She was also present when the Zorbalian uprising concluded. And the Centauri mining disputes? And I understand the pattern, Lieutenant. Yexthal stared at the display, trying to process information that challenged his understanding of how galactic conflicts were resolved. Are you telling me that this one human has been involved in ending every major war in our sector? The data suggests that, sir, but there's something else. More? The casualty reports, sir. Before they were classified, I caught a glimpse of the numbers, and Lieutenant Kexworth's tentacles had gone completely still, a sign of deep anxiety in her species. Sir, in 15 years of conflict resolution, her operations have resulted in 0 friendly casualties. 0, Yexthal said quietly. 0 friendly casualties, sir. Perfect mission success rate. Present at the conclusion of every major conflict. The lieutenant looked up from her display. Sir, either we're looking at the most successful diplomatic mediator in galactic history, or what, Lieutenant? Or we're looking at someone whose definition of diplomatic resolution is significantly different from the standard interpretation. Commander Yexthal activated his direct communication line to Chief Vex-Kalim. Chief, I need you to ask the human a very specific question. Yes, sir. Ask her to explain what diplomatic resolution means in the context of her work. Through the security center's observation system, they watched Chief Vex-Kalim approach Jade with the careful demeanor of someone who was beginning to suspect that his routine screening had become anything but routine. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, could you elaborate on what your diplomatic resolution work typically involves? Jade looked up from her patient waiting, with what appeared to be genuine interest in the question. Oh, the usual. Someone's shooting at someone else, negotiations have broken down, traditional diplomatic approaches aren't working. I get sent in to encourage a more productive conversation. Encourage how? Well, that depends on the situation. Sometimes people just need a neutral third party to help them see the benefits of peaceful resolution. Sometimes they need more direct persuasion. Direct persuasion? You know how it is. Some folks are really committed to the violent approach. They need to understand that violence isn't going to solve their problems before they're willing to consider alternatives. Chief Vex-Kalim's voice carried a note of growing concern. And how do you help them understand that? Oh, I show them what real violence looks like. Jade replied with the same pleasant tone she'd used throughout the screening process. Once they see a demonstration of actual military capability, they tend to be much more interested in talking things through. A demonstration? Nothing too dramatic, just enough to make it clear that their current level of conflict is amateur hour. Most people are surprisingly reasonable once they understand the scale of what they're dealing with. In the security center, Lieutenant Kexworth was frantically checking her database access. Sir, I'm getting partial access to conflict resolution reports. The Cytherian border wars ended when both sides agreed to immediate ceasefire. after witnessing what the report calls an educational demonstration of advanced conflict resolution techniques. Educational demonstration? The Zorbalian uprising concluded when the rebel leadership voluntarily surrendered, after experiencing what they described as a clarifying example of why continued resistance was counterproductive. Commander Vex-Kalim felt his understanding of recent galactic history undergoing rapid revision. Lieutenant, are you telling me that the major conflicts of the past 15 years didn't end through traditional diplomatic negotiation? Sir, it appears they ended when someone showed the combatants what would happen if they continued fighting. Someone being our human diplomat. That appears to be the case, sir. Through the communication system, they could hear Chief Vex-Kalim continuing his questioning with the determination of someone who needed answers, even if he wasn't sure he wanted them. Ma'am, when you say you show people what real violence looks like, are you referring to simulations, training exercises, historical examples? Oh no, Jade replied cheerfully. I'm talking about actual demonstrations. Live fire exercises, you might say, though I try to keep the casualties to a minimum. The point is education, not elimination. Live fire exercises, Chief Vex-Kalim repeated weakly. Well, you can't really convey the reality of advanced military capability through theoretical discussions. People need to see what they're actually dealing with. Once they understand the scope of what's possible, they tend to be much more interested in peaceful solutions. And this approach is effective? Oh, extremely. I've got a 100% success rate. Everyone walks away alive and agreeable. Well, most everyone. Sometimes there are a few individuals who need more direct convincing, but that's unusual. In the security center, alarms were now cascading across multiple systems as the computer attempted to process the implications of what it was learning about Jade Whitmore's operational methods. Sir, Lieutenant Kexworth announced with barely controlled panic, the system is now classifying this individual as a Category 12 strategic asset. Category 12, Vex-Kalim said, his voice climbing an octave. Lieutenant, Category 12 classification is reserved for weapons systems capable of single-handedly altering the outcome of interstellar conflicts. Yes, sir. And according to the database, that appears to be an accurate assessment. Commander Vex-Kalim looked at the humans sitting peacefully in their diplomatic screening area, chatting casually with Chief Vex-Kalim about her approach to conflict resolution, and realized that their security screening had just revealed something that might qualify as the most dangerous individual currently in their star system. Lieutenant, what's the standard protocol for processing Category 12 strategic assets through diplomatic screening? Sir, there is no standard protocol. Category 12 assets aren't supposed to travel through civilian facilities. Then what exactly are we supposed to do with her? Lieutenant Kexworth consulted her emergency procedures manual with growing desperation. Sir, the manual says that Category 12 assets should be immediately reported to Galactic Defense Command for specialized handling. And until then, sir, the manual recommends being very polite. Through the communication system, Chief Vex-Kalim's voice carried a note of something approaching terror. Ma'am, I need to ask you about the current diplomatic function you're attending. The Catharian-Zorbalian Peace Summit. What about it? Are you expecting to use your educational demonstration methods at this summit? Oh, I hope not, Jay replied, and her tone carried what sounded like genuine disappointment. This is supposed to be a civilized diplomatic function. I'm technically not allowed to hurt anyone unless they threaten the peace process. Not allowed to hurt anyone, Chief Vex-Kalim repeated, and his voice suggested he found this news simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. Well, there are some exceptions in the mission parameters, but they're pretty restrictive. I'm really hoping this can be resolved through traditional diplomatic channels. What kind of exceptions? Oh, the usual. If someone tries to disrupt the peace process through violence, or if they threaten the safety of the diplomatic participants, or if they demonstrate that they're fundamentally opposed to peaceful resolution. Jade paused thoughtfully. Actually, now that I think about it, the mission parameters are pretty flexible, and that's when Commander Vex-Kalim realized that the galaxy's most important peace summit was about to be attended by someone whose idea of diplomacy involved educational demonstrations of why everyone should agree with her. The terrifying part wasn't that she might use violence to ensure the peace talks succeeded, The terrifying part was that, based on her track record, it would probably work. The system crash happened at exactly 14:27 station time, when Lieutenant Kexvorth made the mistake of trying to access Jade Whitmore's complete service record through the military database's backdoor protocols. "Sir," she announced, with the kind of professional calm that indicated she was trying very hard not to panic. "We have a situation." Commander Yexthal looked up from his increasingly frantic communications with Galactic Command to see that every display in the security center had gone dark except for one, which was showing a single line of text that repeated across the screen. "Classification error. Threat level exceeds system. System parameters." "Lieutenant, what exactly did you try to access?" "The human's complete operational history, sir. I thought if we could get a full picture of her background, we might be able to understand what we're dealing with. Sir, the database appears to be overwhelmed." As if summoned by her words, the main display flickered back to life, showing what appeared to be fragments of data that the system was struggling to process. Numbers scrolled past too quickly to read, interspersed with classification markers that seemed to climb higher with each passing second. 3 level. Calculating. Classification level 15, level 18, level 22. Operational parameters. System error. Neutralization count. Buffalo flow. Level 22? Commander Yexthal's voice cracked slightly. "Lieutenant, our classification system only goes up to level 15. "I know, sir. The computer is apparently creating new classification levels in real time to accommodate whatever it's finding in her records." The display continued its frantic calculations and the numbers climbing past level 25 when a new line of text appeared. "Warning. Individual capability exceeds database storage limits. Recommendation: immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel." "Non-essential personnel," Yexthal repeated weakly. "The computer is recommending that we evacuate the station." "Sir, it gets worse." "How could it possibly get worse?" Lieutenant Kexvorth gestured toward a secondary display that was showing what appeared to be historical battle reports. "The system managed to retrieve partial records from the conflicts she's been involved in before the security protocols kicked in." Commander Yexthal moved closer to read the fragmented data and felt his species equivalent of a heart attack beginning to manifest. Kadawarian border wars. Hostile casualties. 12,847. Zorbidian uprising. Hostile casualties. 8,923. Centauri mining conflict. Hostile casualties. 15,634. Vegan trade disputes. Hostile casualties. 7,891. "Hostile casualties," he said quietly. "Those are kill counts." "Yes, sir. And these are just the partial records the system managed to access before the classification protocols shut us out." "Lieutenant, add those numbers up." Kexvorth's tentacles danced across her calculations display. "Sir, the visible records show 45,295 confirmed hostile casualties across 4 major conflicts." 45,000, Yexthal breathed. "She's personally responsible for 45,000 deaths?" "Sir, those are just the partial records. The system indicates that the complete count is significantly higher, but it can't display numbers that large." "Can't display numbers that large," he repeated, staring at the human who was still sitting calmly in the diplomatic screening area, apparently unaware that the station's computer systems were having a nervous breakdown trying to process her existence. The main display suddenly cleared, showing a single message that made everyone in the security center fall silent. "Individual classified. Asset strategic pacification asset. Operational designation, peace enforcer. Mission, diplomatic success. By any means necessary. Authorization level, unlimited. Peace enforcer," Lieutenant Kexvorth said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I think we now understand what happened to all those conflicts. They didn't end through traditional diplomatic negotiation," Yexthal realized. "They ended because someone killed anyone who refused to make peace. Not just someone, sir. Her. She's been single-handedly ending galactic conflicts by eliminating anyone who wouldn't agree to peaceful resolution." Commander Yexthal felt his worldview undergoing complete restructuring. For the past 15 years, the galaxy had enjoyed what historians called the Great Peace Period, An unprecedented era of diplomatic success, where major conflicts resolved themselves with surprising speed and efficiency. Now he was discovering that the Great Peace Period existed because there was a human who made peace negotiations succeed by ensuring that anyone who preferred war wasn't around to interfere with the diplomatic process. "Sir," Chief Vex-Kalim's voice crackled through the communication system with barely controlled terror. "The human is asking if she can proceed to the summit venue. She says she'd like to get set up before the delegates arrive." "Set up?" Yexthal asked weakly. "That's what she said, sir. She mentioned something about establishing operational parameters and assessing potential disruption vectors. Through the security center's observation system, they could see Jade checking what appeared to be a small electronic device. The badge on her uniform was now displaying 3,848, though none of them could remember seeing it change. "Lieutenant," Yexthal said carefully, "access the summit security protocols. I want to know what kind of threat assessment we're supposed to use for Peace Enforcer assets." "Sir, there are no protocols for Peace Enforcer assets. According to the database, they don't officially exist." "They don't exist?" "The classification appears to be part of a black operations program that operates outside normal military command structures." "Sir, as far as the official records are concerned, Peace Enforcers are a theoretical concept." "Theoretical," Yexthal mused, watching the very non-theoretical human who was apparently responsible for 15 years of galactic peace through what could only be described as aggressive diplomacy. "Sir, we're receiving a priority communication from the summit venue." "Put it through." The display activated to show the agitated features of Summit Security Director Kelnoth. "Commander Yexthal, we have an urgent situation developing at the Peace Summit." "What kind of situation?" "The Catherian and Zorbalian delegations are refusing to attend the same sessions. They're demanding separate negotiations because they claim the other side is planning to disrupt the peace process through violence." "Are they?" "Our intelligence suggests that both sides have brought unauthorized military advisors who may be planning to sabotage the summit if the negotiations don't go their way." Commander Yexthal looked at Jade, who was now standing and gathering what appeared to be a small travel bag. "Director Kelnoth, we may have a solution to your problem." "A solution?" "We're sending you a diplomatic specialist who has experience with difficult negotiations." "What kind of experience?" "The kind that ensures everyone leaves the summit alive and agreeable." "Alive and agreeable," Director Kelnova repeated. "That sounds like exactly what we need." "Just one thing, Director. When she arrives, don't ask about her background, and don't run any security checks on her credentials." "Human representative." "We know." Commander Yexthal looked at the cascade of system warnings still flooding his displays. "Because asking questions about her background constitutes a security breach that could crash your entire computer system." "Commander, what exactly are you sending us?" "Diplomatic insurance, Director. The kind that guarantees successful peace negotiations." Through the communication system, Chief Vex-Kalim's voice carried a note of relief, mixed with terror. "Sir, the human says she's ready to proceed to the summit venue. She wanted me to tell you that she appreciates your patience with the paperwork delays." "Tell her she's cleared for transit," Yexthal replied, then activated his direct line to the summit venue. "Director Kelnoth, your specialist is en route. What should we expect?" "Expect the most successful diplomatic summit in galactic history, and hope that everyone involved is committed to peaceful resolution." "And if they're not?" Commander Yexthal watched Jade walk calmly toward the transit station, her badge now reading 3,848, and her travel bag looking suspiciously like it contained more than diplomatic papers. "Director, if anyone at that summit isn't committed to peaceful resolution, they're about to learn why the past 15 years have been so remarkably peaceful." As the transit doors closed behind Jade Whitmore, Lieutenant Kexvorth managed to restore partial function to their computer system. One final message appeared on the main display before the security protocols locked them out completely. Peace Enforcement Protocol activated. Diplomatic success, probability, 100%. Estimated casualties, dependent on cooperation level. Mission settled. Operational. A low 100% diplomatic success probability, Yexthal said quietly. "Yes, sir, with casualties dependent on cooperation level." "Lieutenant, what do you think happens to people who don't cooperate with a peace enforcer?" Kexvorth looked at the fragment of kill count data still visible on her screen. "Sir, I think they become statistics in someone else's diplomatic success story. Commander Yexthal realized that the galaxy's most important peace summit was about to be attended by someone whose definition of diplomacy was ensuring that anyone who preferred conflict wasn't around to vote against peaceful resolution. The truly terrifying part wasn't that she would probably kill anyone who threatened the peace process. The truly terrifying part was that, based on 15 years of galactic peace, it was apparently the most effective diplomatic strategy ever developed. And somewhere in the depths of the station's computer system, hidden behind layers of classification and security protocols that most beings didn't even know existed, a simple counter continued its quiet work of documenting successful diplomatic resolutions. 3,848, and counting. The implications of what they'd discovered began to cascade through Commander Yexthal's consciousness like a slow-motion avalanche. He activated his secure communication channel to Galactic Defense Command, knowing that what he was about to report would fundamentally alter how the galaxy understood the past decade and a half of history. "This is Nexus Station Gamma reporting a classification level Omega discovery," he announced, using the highest priority designation in the galactic communication protocols. The response was immediate. "Commander Yexthal, this is Admiral Korth Prime at Galactic Defense Command. Confirm classification level Omega. What is the nature of your discovery?" "Admiral, we have inadvertently identified the operational asset responsible for the Great Peace Period." The silence that followed lasted exactly 37 seconds, which Yexthal knew because Lieutenant Kexforth was timing it on her display while frantically trying to prevent their computer system from suffering a complete breakdown. "Commander, please repeat your last transmission." "Admiral, the Great Peace Period of the past 15 years appears to be the result of systematic hostile elimination by a single strategic asset operating under the designation Peace Enforcer." "Peace Enforcer," Admiral Korth Prime repeated slowly. "Commander, peace enforcers are theoretical constructs. They don't actually exist, sir. With respect, one of them just walked through our diplomatic screening carrying credentials that crashed our security system and displaying a casualty count that broke our database's numerical limits to the tune of 45,000 confirmed hostile eliminations across 4 major conflicts, sir. And those are just the partial records our system could access before the classification protocols locked us out." The Admiral's next silence lasted 49 seconds. "Commander, are you telling me that a single individual has been responsible for ending galactic conflicts through direct hostile elimination?" "That appears to be the case, sir." "And this individual is currently where?" "En route to the Catherian-Zorbolian Peace Summit, sir. She's been assigned as a diplomatic specialist." "Diplomatic specialist?" Admiral Korth Prime's voice carried the tone of someone watching their understanding of reality undergo complete reconstruction. "Commander, I'm going to need you to compile everything your system managed to access about this individual and transmit it immediately." "Sir, most of the data is classified above our clearance level." "Commander, as of this moment you have temporary clearance for anything related to this discovery. The Galactic Defense Council needs to understand what we're dealing with." As Lieutenant Kexforth began compiling the fragmented data they'd managed to retrieve, Commander Yexthal found himself contemplating the broader implications of their discovery. "Lieutenant, pull up the timeline of major galactic conflicts for the past 20 years. "Sir, I want to see the pattern. If this peace enforcer has been active for 15 years, there should be a clear delineation between the period before and after her deployment." The historical data appeared on their main display, and the pattern was immediately obvious. For the 5 years preceding Jade Whitmore's apparent activation, the galaxy had experienced 12 major conflicts, with an average duration of 18 months, and casualty rates in the hundreds of thousands. For the 15 years following her deployment, there had been only 4 major conflicts, each lasting less than 6 months, and ending with what the historical records described as unexpected diplomatic breakthroughs. "Lieutenant, what were the actual casualty rates for those 4 conflicts?" "Sir, official records show minimal casualties. The reports describe limited engagement and surgical conflict resolution. But we now know that's not the complete picture." "No, sir. The hostile casualty counts we access suggest that surgical conflict resolution meant eliminating anyone who wouldn't agree to peaceful terms." Commander Yexthal stared at the historical timeline, seeing 15 years of what everyone had celebrated as unprecedented diplomatic success in an entirely new light. "Lieutenant, Do we have any data on how these peace enforcer operations actually work? Limited information, sir. But based on the mission parameters we accessed, the protocol appears to be straightforward. Attempt traditional diplomatic resolution first, and if that fails, eliminate hostile elements until the remaining parties are willing to negotiate. Eliminate hostile elements, Yexthal repeated. How does she determine who qualifies as a hostile element? The operational parameters indicate that anyone who demonstrates fundamental opposition to peaceful resolution through word or action qualifies for neutralization. Word or action? Yes, sir. Apparently, threatening the peace process verbally is sufficient justification for elimination. The communication system activated with an incoming priority message from the Peace Summit venue. Director Quelnoth's image appeared on their display, and his expression suggested that recent developments had exceeded his capacity for professional calm. Commander Yexthal, we need to discuss the diplomatic specialist you sent us. Is there a problem, Director? Team arrived 15 minutes ago and immediately began what she called preliminary threat assessment. She's currently reviewing the security files of every delegate, advisor, and staff member attending the summit. That sounds like standard security protocol. Commander, she's not just reviewing their files. She's categorizing them according to what she calls cooperation probability indexes and neutralization priority rankings. Commander Yexthal felt a familiar cold sensation in his digestive system. Director, what exactly is she doing with these rankings? She's created a list of 17 individuals who she says represent potential disruption vectors that may require active management during the negotiations. Active management? That's what she called it. She also mentioned that she's prepared to provide educational demonstrations if any of the delegates prove resistant to peaceful resolution. Educational demonstrations, Yexthal repeated weakly. Commander, I'm beginning to suspect that your diplomatic specialist has a rather unique approach to ensuring successful negotiations. Through their communication link, Lieutenant Kexvor's voice carried urgent concern. Sir, I'm receiving data from the summit venue's security system. The human's badge counter just increased to 3,849. Increased, Director Kelnoth asked. Commander, what kind of counter is your diplomat carrying? Commander Yexthal looked at the casualty data still fragmentarily visible on his displays and realized that somewhere at the Peace Summit, someone had just been reclassified from potential disruption vector to successful diplomatic resolution. Director, I strongly recommend that you inform all summit participants that this is a strictly diplomatic function, where any form of aggressive behavior will be considered a direct threat to the peace process. Why would I need to tell them that? Because, Director, our diplomatic specialist has a 100% success rate in ensuring peaceful resolutions, and her methods for achieving that success rate involve making certain that anyone who prefers conflict isn't around to interfere with the negotiation. The silence from Director Quelnoth lasted considerably longer than the Admiral's had. Commander, are you telling me that you've sent us an assassin disguised as a diplomat? Director, I'm telling you that we've sent you someone who ensures that diplomacy succeeds by removing obstacles to diplomatic success. Obstacles being people who don't want to make peace? That appears to be the operational definition, sir. Director Kelnoth's expression suggested he was re-evaluating every aspect of his summit security planning. Commander, what should I expect from the negotiations now? Director, I expect you'll witness the most efficient diplomatic summit in galactic history. Everyone will be very eager to reach peaceful agreement, and if they're not eager, Commander Yexthal watched Lieutenant Kexvorth's display, where the summit security feeds showed Jade Whitmore moving through the venue with the calm professionalism of someone conducting a routine inspection. Her badge now read 3,849, and she was carrying what appeared to be a standard diplomatic portfolio, except that the portfolio was slightly larger than standard diplomatic cases, and it seemed to be designed with compartments that could hold items considerably more substantial than negotiation documents. Director, if anyone at that summit isn't eager to reach peaceful agreement, they're about to discover why the galaxy has enjoyed 15 years of unprecedented diplomatic success. Commander, what exactly happens to people who threaten the peace process when a peace enforcer is present? Yexthal looked at the partial casualty data on his screen, showing 45,295 confirmed hostile eliminations across 4 major conflicts, and realized that the galaxy's most important diplomatic summit was about to demonstrate why some negotiations had a 100% success rate. Director, they become part of the diplomatic success statistics, and as if summoned by his words, the counter on Jade's badge ticked up to 3,850. Summit Security Director Kel Noth had been managing high-stakes diplomatic functions for nearly 2 decades, but he'd never experienced anything quite like watching Jade Whitmore prepare for a peace negotiation. She had transformed the summit's main conference room into what could only be described as a tactical operations center. Her diplomatic portfolio, when opened, revealed an array of equipment that definitely hadn't come from any standard diplomatic supply catalog. Most disturbing was the casual efficiency with which she arranged everything, as if converting peaceful venues into strategic positions was routine professional procedure. Ms. Whitmore, Director Noth ventured carefully, could you explain what you're setting up? Standard diplomatic preparation, Jade replied, calibrating what appeared to be a sophisticated scanning device. I need to establish baseline readings for all participants before negotiations begin. Baseline readings for what? Stress levels, deception indicators, aggression markers, threat potential assessments. She spoke with the matter-of-fact tone of someone describing routine administrative tasks. Can't have successful diplomatic resolution if you don't know who's actually committed to the process. And if someone isn't committed to the process, Jade paused in her preparations to look at him with what might have been sympathy. Director, that's why I'm here, to ensure everyone becomes committed to peaceful resolution. The first indication that Jade's approach to diplomacy was unconventional came when the Catherian and Zorbalian delegations entered the conference room. Both groups had brought their authorized military advisors, tough, battle-hardened individuals whose body language suggested they were prepared for negotiations to fail. Welcome, everyone, Jade announced with professional warmth. I'm Jade Whitmore, your diplomatic facilitator for these negotiations. Before we begin, I'd like to establish some ground rules. Catherian military advisor Tapes Core, a scarred veteran whose species was renowned for their aggressive negotiation tactics, leaned back in his chair with obvious skepticism. Ground rules? Simple ones. Everyone participates in good faith. No threats explicit or implied. No sabotage attempts. No walking away from the table, unless there's genuine agreement. Jade's tone remained pleasant throughout this list. Violations of these rules will result in immediate corrective action. Corrective action? Zorbalian chief negotiator Velstrim asked with the kind of diplomatic caution that suggested she was familiar with euphemisms. I'll demonstrate alternative approaches to conflict resolution, Jade explained helpfully. Most people find the demonstrations quite educational. Vex-Kar's scarred features shifted into what passed for amusement among his species. And what if we prefer our traditional negotiation methods? Then you'll learn why I have a 100% success rate in diplomatic resolution, Jade replied, and something in her voice made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. The negotiations began with standard diplomatic posturing. Both sides presented their initial positions, made their traditional demands, and engaged in the kind of verbal maneuvering that typically characterized the opening phases of peace talks. Jade observed everything with the focused attention of a professional conducting a detailed assessment. Her scanning equipment provided a steady stream of data that she reviewed periodically, making notes on what appeared to be evaluation forms. The first crisis came 40 minutes into the session, when Catherian Admiral QX Thane made what sounded like a routine diplomatic statement, but registered as a direct threat on Jade's monitoring systems. The Catherian Empire maintains that certain territorial concessions are simply unacceptable, Admiral QX Thane declared. We would rather see this entire sector burn than accept such terms. Jade's badge counter, which Director Kelnoth had been nervously monitoring, remained at 3,850. But her scanning equipment began displaying warning indicators that suggested something had just shifted in the room's tactical dynamics. Admiral, Jade said with the same pleasant tone she'd maintained throughout the session, could you clarify what you mean by see this entire sector burn? I mean that some prices are too high to pay for peace, Admiral Quexthane replied, with the kind of military swagger that suggested he was accustomed to intimidating diplomatic personnel. I see. Jade made a note on her evaluation form. And you're committed to that position, regardless of alternative perspectives? Absolutely, The Catharian military does not compromise on matters of territorial integrity. Thank you for that clarification, Admiral. What happened next occurred so quickly that Director Kelnoth's security cameras barely captured the sequence of events. Jade moved with fluid precision that suggested extensive training in techniques that definitely weren't taught in diplomatic schools. Admiral Vex-Kalim found himself immobilized in a restraint hold that appeared to be simultaneously non-lethal and absolutely inescapable. Now, Admiral, Jade said conversationally, let me provide you with an educational demonstration of what seeing the sector burn actually looks like when it's implemented by professionals. She activated a holographic projector that displayed what appeared to be real-time tactical analysis of the entire star system. Fleet positions, defensive installations, strategic resources, civilian population centers. Everything was mapped, with the kind of detail that suggested intelligence capabilities far beyond standard diplomatic resources. Current Catharian military assets in this system: 43 vessels, ranging from light cruisers to one dreadnought-class battleship. Estimated combat effectiveness against peer opponents: moderate. Estimated survival time against asymmetric warfare specialists: approximately 11 minutes. Admiral Vex-Kalim struggled against the restraint hold, but Jade maintained her grip with casual ease while continuing her presentation. Zorbalian military assets: 38 vessels, focus on rapid strike capabilities. Estimated survival time against systematic elimination protocols: approximately 14 minutes. Zorbalian military coordinator Hex Prime had risen from his seat but stopped moving when Jade's scanning equipment focused on him with obvious targeting implications. Combined fleet assets of both sides, sufficient to devastate 3 inhabited worlds and render 2 trade routes unusable for approximately 50 years. Insufficient to prevent total strategic elimination by specialized pacification assets. The holographic display shifted to show what appeared to be detailed attack vectors that could systematically dismantle every military installation in the system within hours. This, Admiral, is what seeing the sector burn looks like when it's implemented by someone with appropriate training and resources. Your current military posture represents amateur-level conflict capability. Would you like me to demonstrate the difference? Admiral Vex-Kalim had stopped struggling and was staring at the tactical display with the expression of someone whose understanding of military capability was undergoing rapid and unwelcome revision. I.e., that is, the Catharian Empire may be willing to reconsider certain positions. Excellent. That's the kind of flexibility that leads to successful diplomatic outcomes. Jade released the restraint hold and deactivated the holographic display. Now, shall we return to productive negotiations? The badge counter on her uniform now read 3,851, though Director Kelnoth was fairly certain that Admiral Vex-Kalim was still alive. The rest of the negotiations proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Both sides discovered unexpected willingness to compromise on issues that had seemed non-negotiable 30 minutes earlier. Territorial disputes found creative solutions. Trade disagreements resolved themselves through innovative approaches that neither side had previously considered. By the end of the 4-hour session, the Catharian-Zorbalian peace accords had been signed, ratified, and celebrated with what appeared to be genuine relief from all participants. As the delegations filed out of the conference room, Director Kelnoth approached Jade with questions that had been building throughout the afternoon. Mrs. Whitmore, what exactly happened to Admiral Vex-Kalim? My instruments registered him as a casualty, but he's clearly still alive. Educational demonstration, Jade replied, packing her equipment with the same casual efficiency she'd displayed in setting it up. Sometimes, people need to understand the reality of what they're actually threatening before they're willing to consider peaceful alternatives. But your badge counter increased. Oh, that. The Admiral's military career ended when he understood that continued aggression would result in systematic elimination of everything he was trying to protect. Professionally speaking, the person who walked into this room no longer exists. He's been replaced by someone who prefers diplomatic solutions. You killed his willingness to fight? I educated him about the consequences of preferring conflict over cooperation. Most people find the educational process quite transformative. Director Kelnoth realized that he had just witnessed a form of diplomacy that operated on principles entirely different from anything in his training. Mr. Whitmore, what happens to people who refused to be educated. Jade shouldered her diplomatic portfolio, which Director Kelnoth now understood contained equipment designed for considerably more than paperwork management. Director, in 15 years of diplomatic facilitation, I've never encountered anyone who wasn't willing to learn once they understood what they were actually dealing with. People are surprisingly reasonable when they have accurate information about their alternatives. As she walked toward the exit, Jade paused to add one final observation that Director Kelnoth would remember for the rest of his career. The galaxy has been peaceful for the past 15 years because conflicts end when people understand that continued fighting means dealing with specialists who are significantly more dangerous than whatever they thought they were fighting about. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, computer systems in every major military installation were simultaneously attempting to process incoming data about the Catherian-Zorbalian Peace Summit. The results were catastrophic. Galactic Command's primary database crashed completely when it tried to correlate the summit's success rate with the operational parameters of the diplomatic facilitator who had achieved it. Secondary systems failed when they attempted to calculate threat assessments for individuals whose existence apparently violated the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic security classifications. Admiral Korth Prime found himself staring at displays that showed error messages he'd never seen before. System error: individual capability exceeds classification. Probation for deployment completed. Sentiment pause as everyone processes the significance of the proceeding. Disymphatic corruption, threat level calculations recommendation. Complete revision of security assessment protect. How many diplomatic facilitators like Jade Whitmore are currently active? He asked his intelligence staff. Sir, we can't determine that. Our databases aren't designed to track individuals who don't officially exist, but whose operational success rates break our competitional models. Then how do we assess the threat level of humans who specialize in diplomatic resolution? Sir, based on the evidence from the Catherian-Zorbalian Summit, we may need to reclassify all human diplomatic personnel as potential strategic assets. Admiral Korth Prime looked at the reports, showing that the galaxy's most intractable conflict had been resolved in 4 hours by someone whose existences crashed computer systems designed to handle planetary-scale military threats. Lieutenant, initiate a complete review of all human diplomatic postings. I want to know how many non-threatening diplomats are actually specialized pacification assets. Sir, what should we do if we find more of them? The Admiral considered this question, while watching reports flood in from across the galaxy about the unprecedented success of human diplomatic missions that had previously been categorized as routine negotiations. Lieutenant, I think we need to accept that when humans say they prefer talking, they mean they'll kill anyone who makes talking impossible. 6 months later, the Galactic Security Council published new threat assessment protocols that included a category that had never existed before: Class Omega Diplomatic Assets. The classification applied to individuals who ensured diplomatic success through methods that traditional security analysis couldn't process. The protocols included specific recommendations for interacting with Class Omega assets, the most important of which was: when Class Omega diplomatic personnel indicate that peaceful resolution is preferred, all parties should immediately prioritize achieving peaceful resolution. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous humans weren't the ones who threatened violence. They were the ones who quietly ensured that anyone who preferred violence to diplomacy wasn't around to vote against peaceful solutions. And somewhere in the depths of classified files that required security clearances most beings didn't know existed, a simple counter continued its quiet documentation of successful diplomatic resolution. The number kept climbing, and the galaxy kept getting more peaceful, one educational demonstration at a time.